Ethan heard a desperate cry coming from the fence at the back of his yard. Following the sound to the edge of the property, he discovered a young bobcat tangled in rusty wire, its fur bristling with fear. Its golden eyes blazed with raw terror as they locked onto him. Ethan could have walked away, but instead, he knelt down, taking a risk few would dare to face. In that moment of hesitation, he reminded himself, this was no pet. A deep growl rumbled from its throat, sharp white teeth bared in warning. Yet he also noticed the way its entire body trembled, the way those sharp cries broke apart into pitiful whimpers. Every movement carried danger. The bobcat hissed, claws slashing wildly at the air. "Easy there," Ethan whispered, keeping his voice steady even with danger just within reach. "I'm not here to hurt you." In that very moment, he chose the only path his heart urged him toward, to help. And he could never have imagined that this single act of compassion would one day be returned. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss any of our unexpected stories. Ethan had grown accustomed to a life woven from simple routines and the quiet rhythms of rural America. His weathered wooden house sat at the edge of an oak and maple forest on the outskirts of a small Montana town, where golden pastures stretched to the horizon before merging into the cool shadows of towering trees. The air always carried the earthy blend of sun-dried grass, pine resin, and damp soil after rain. He made his living mending gates, building fences, and tending gardens for neighbors around the valley. But his true passion lay in the wild world that ran alongside everyday life. On weekends, Ethan could be found at the local wildlife rescue center, where he helped young hawks take their first flights and taught the town's children how to respect creatures they might otherwise know only from books. Years of rescue work had sharpened his ears, trained enough to tell the difference between the playful meow of a neighborhood cat and the harsh, guttural cry of something untamed deep within the woods. It was that skill that made him stop short one seemingly ordinary noon, just as he stepped across his porch with a basket of freshly washed laundry in his arms. A cry split the noonday stillness, so sharp and cold it sent a chill down his spine. It was not the familiar whine of a stray cat begging for food. This sound was harsh, rasping, edged with desperation, the cry of a creature caught in pain. Ethan dropped the basket of laundry onto the wooden porch steps, wiped his rough hands against the faded denim of his jeans, and quietly followed the sound toward the fence at the back of his property. His heart pounded in his chest, each step tightening the invisible thread of suspense. And then he saw it. Snared in the rusty wire mesh was a young bobcat, no bigger than a medium-sized hound. Its tawny coat was flecked with burrs and pine needles, and its hind leg was locked tight in the merciless grip of twisted galvanized wire. Its golden eyes, blazing like the color of late autumn maple leaves, burned with terror and fury. Even wounded, its body radiated the raw power of a predator, muscles taut, every hair bristling, the whole frame trembling with the surge of survival instinct. Ethan froze, standing only a few steps away, his breath caught in his throat. He had dealt with fallen hawk fledglings, had freed raccoons from backyard trash traps, but this was different. This was no pet. The jaws of a bobcat could crush bone, and a single swipe of its paw was enough to leave a man bleeding. The animal hissed, sharp white teeth bared in a growling warning. Instinct told Ethan to back away, to retreat from the raw force of the wild. But in that instant, he noticed something else. Its whole body was trembling. The piercing cries had fractured into weak, broken whimpers, spilling out each time it strained against the cold steel mesh. Yes, before him stood a born predator. But right now, all he saw was a helpless creature, exhausted and trapped in a snare of man's making. That fence was his fence, and this wound, whether he liked it or not, was his responsibility. Memories of his days at the Wildlife Rescue Center surged back like scenes from a slow-motion reel. He recalled the hard-edged lectures, the constant reminders that countless wild animals suffered because of man-made structures, and that sometimes a small act of compassion at the right moment could turn danger into a rescue. Ethan whispered softly to himself, as if reciting an old vow, "Do no further harm." Keeping a safe distance, he studied the animal with eyes trained by hundreds of rescues. The bobcat's hind leg was twisted tightly through a gap where the wire mesh had come loose. The strand of galvanized steel had cut deep into fur and flesh, dark blood seeping out, though luckily, it had not yet reached the muscle. He knew well. The flood of adrenaline coursing through its body would dull the pain while fueling its will to fight back. A single mistake, a careless movement, and one swipe of its claws could shred his arm. To save it, he would have to act quickly and precisely, protecting both the animal's life and his own. Ethan turned toward the old barn, his heart still pounding. In the dim light, he gathered the things that might spell the difference between success and disaster. A pair of thick leather welding gloves, a heavy blanket smelling faintly of grease, a bottle of antiseptic spray, and his well-worn fence pliers, their blades dulled by years of use. Before making a move, Ethan paused to call a friend at the rescue center, seeking a bit of guidance. "Keep your movements calm and deliberate." Her voice came steady and sure over the line. "Speak softly. Don't make direct eye contact. Get the wire off as quickly as you can. If you can cover her head with the blanket, she might calm down just enough to let you work." That confidence ran through him like a warm current along his spine, giving him strength. Returning to the fence line, Ethan crouched low, trying to keep his voice as gentle as when he soothed broken-winged owlets. "Easy now, girl," he whispered, his breath blending with the wind through the pines. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." The bobcat's ears flattened tight against her skull, eyes flashing in the glow of dusk, but she didn't lunge. Inch by inch, Ethan extended the blanket, then draped it over her head. She jerked violently, claws tearing at the ground in panic, but within moments she stilled beneath the heavy fabric. Darkness covered her eyes, and perhaps the world around her felt a little less frightening. His gloved hands trembled but stayed firm. Ethan worked the pliers into the twisted wire, feeling the tension biting hard. Each pry sent a screech of metal against metal, answered by the low guttural growl rumbling from deep inside the cat's throat. Sweat rolled down his brow, stinging the corners of his eyes. For one fleeting second, Ethan thought of letting go of calling in a professional and backing away from the danger. But time offered no mercy. With every passing heartbeat, the wire drove deeper into the animal's flesh. He drew in a deep breath and clenched the pliers tight in both hands. A sharp metallic snap rang out, the sound of steel giving way in the still air. The sudden release of tension knocked Ethan off balance, nearly sending him sprawling backward. The bobcat lunged free, yanking her leg from the trap, staggering a few paces before collapsing into a patch of wild clover. She clamped her jaws on the blanket, tore it from her head, and swung back toward him. Wild eyes, sharp as blades, searched him for any sign of threat. Blood matted thick around her ankle, but the steel shackle was gone. In that breathless moment, Ethan held himself rigid, every muscle braced, waiting for the strike that could come at any instant. But instead of attacking, the bobcat pushed herself upright on 3 trembling legs. She paused, fixing him with a piercing gaze, wild, untamed, yet carrying something deeper. A moment Ethan knew would stay with him for the rest of his life. Then, without a sound, she turned, slipped into the trees, and vanished as if she had never been there at all. Ethan sank to the ground, his body drained as the rush of adrenaline ebbed, leaving only hollow exhaustion. The smell of churned earth mixed with the heavy scent of pine resin in the air. In that still, primal silence, He whispered a thank you into the empty space where the animal had vanished. That night, sleep did not come easily. The rescue replayed in his mind again and again, like a film running backward without end. Ethan kept asking himself if he had done enough. He remembered the moment he managed to spray antiseptic on the wound while she still staggered under the blanket, trying to be as gentle as possible before she bolted away. Before leaving the fence line, he had set down a shallow dish of water and a piece of meat in the brush. He knew the iron rule at the rescue center: never let wild animals grow dependent on people. But the thought of her limping through the dark woods on an empty stomach was more than he could bear. Ethan told himself, just this once. A lifeline thrown to a soul in need of a chance to survive. The next morning, as the sun lifted over the pines, golden light spilled across the dew-soaked grass behind the house. Ethan stepped outside to check the fence. Suddenly, a shadow stirred beneath the elderberry bushes. Two golden eyes glimmered through the leaves, watchful, burning bright and unmistakable. She had returned. Where yesterday had been raw terror, now there was only a gnawing, primal hunger. Ethan's heart lifted and ached all at once. Moving slowly, he retrieved a scrap of meat from the kitchen and set it down at the edge of the wooden porch. The bobcat crept forward, body pressed low like an arrow drawn to the string, muscles rippling under her rough coat. Then, in a flash, she darted forward, seized the meat, and retreated instantly into the shadows. The crack of tearing flesh echoed in the air as she devoured it, ferocious and unrelenting, as if every bite were a battle for survival. Ethan stood still, keeping his distance, silently watching. In that moment, he was struck with awe at the fierce will to live bursting from every movement of the wild creature trembling just beyond his yard. In the days that followed, the tentative dance repeated itself like an unspoken ritual. At dawn or as dusk poured across the yard, she would appear again, lingering at the edge of the trees, golden eyes watching from the shadows. And Ethan, as if in reply, would set out food each time a little farther from the porch. He knew he was walking a fragile line. Bobcats are solitary creatures, fiercely territorial. Human handouts can make them accustomed to people, bolder, and that boldness can lead them into danger. At the rescue center, Ethan had told countless visitors the unshakable principle: wild animals must remain wild. And yet here he was, breaking the very rule, a single exception born of compassion. To minimize the risk, he held firm to boundaries, always keeping a safe distance, avoiding direct eye contact, never reaching out to touch her. He only watched from afar, quietly setting the food down, silently vowing to himself that he would taper it off once her wound had healed. One evening, as he carried a bag of groceries from his truck into the yard, Ethan suddenly felt the canvas grow unexpectedly heavy in his hands. Looking down, he burst out laughing. The bobcat had nosed her way into the sack, burying her face among the onions and carrots, rummaging like a petty thief. She looked up at him with a sprig of parsley caught in her whiskers, and for the first time, Ethan glimpsed a flicker of playfulness in those wild eyes. Of course, it wasn't the relaxed sprawl of a house cat. Her whole body remained taut as a drawn bow, every muscle ready to spring away at any moment. But in those golden eyes shimmered a spark of curiosity, a fragile willingness to share this small space with him, if only for a moment. Ethan gently nudged her aside with the tip of his boot. The bobcat hopped lightly to the ground, then sat a few yards away, calmly washing her face like any other cat. He placed the bruised parsley back into the bag, shaking his head in bemused amazement at the strange encounter. Time passed, summer quietly fading into the crisp days of fall. The wound on her leg healed with the turning of the season. Ethan watched the change unfold little by little, the muscles filling out again, her stride growing stronger. He saw her test herself first, resting a light weight on the leg that had once been trapped, then pressing harder, until one day she ran with the perfect grace nature had meant her to have. He no longer left meat every day. Instead, Ethan placed a bowl of water near the tree line and began encouraging the natural behaviors he had so often preached to others. He scattered small pieces of food across the grass so she would have to search for them, or left a frozen rabbit from the rescue center to simulate a real hunt. At dusk, he sometimes caught sight of her stalking through the weeds, leaping after invisible grasshoppers. Sharpening the instincts she would need for the day, she finally disappeared into the deep woods, leaving him behind forever. Despite his efforts to keep boundaries, there were fragile moments when their worlds overlapped, and all Ethan could do was sit in quiet humility before her presence. Once, he sat on the porch steps reading a book when the bobcat padded up silently and lay down just a few feet away, paws tucked neatly beneath her chest, eyelids drifting low. The setting sun cast a golden wash across her fur, and for half an hour of perfect stillness, they simply existed together, a man and a wild spirit, sharing the silence. From time to time, she would suddenly roll onto her side, exposing her spotted belly to the open sky, only to flip back over with a low, embarrassed chuff, as if startled by her own moment of vulnerability. Ethan chuckled softly but never reached out. He understood trust was a gift, not something to be seized. On another afternoon, while he was repairing the very stretch of fence that had once trapped her, he felt a presence behind him. Turning his head slowly, he saw her perched atop a fallen log about 10 yards away. Her golden eyes locked on his every move, focused so intently it felt as though they could pierce straight through him. Ethan held up the pliers for her to see, then went on with his work, speaking calmly, explaining each movement as if giving a lesson to an attentive student. The absurdity of the scene, a man standing in the woods, teaching a fencing lesson to a bobcat, was not lost on him. Yet in that moment, the absurd felt strangely right. She blinked slowly, a gesture Ethan had seen house cats use to signal calm. He returned the blink in kind. Perhaps she was studying the thing that had once held her captive, or perhaps she was simply choosing to linger near him out of curiosity. Whatever the reason, her presence made his daily work far less lonely. It wasn't long before the neighbors began to notice his unusual companion. One afternoon, a man walking his dog caught sight of the bobcat perched casually on Ethan's porch rail. He could only shake his head, eyes wide in disbelief at the sight before him. "You sure that's safe?" the man called out over the white picket fence. Ethan answered honestly, his voice steady. "It's not about safe or unsafe. It's about respect. I don't own her. I only helped when she needed it. She comes and goes as she pleases." The man shrugged, tugged his dog along, and walked on. But the story didn't stop there. It spread through the small town like wildfire. Some admired Ethan's courage. Others feared he was unintentionally taming a predator, yet he remained steadfast. Guided by his years of grounding in wildlife ethics, he knew exactly the fragile line he was walking and why he could not turn away from it. Over time, the bobcat's visits grew fewer and farther between. The crisp days of autumn gave way to the harsh stillness of winter. She spent more and more time roaming beyond his fields, out across the wide pastures behind his home. Ethan missed her, but he took comfort in the thought that this distance was for the best. For the ultimate goal of any rescuer is always release. A creature healed, returned to the wild, no longer dependent on human hands. He filled his days with countless other rescues. A baby squirrel that had fallen from its nest, a brood of ducklings separated from their mother, a barred owl struck by a passing truck. Each animal demanded its own skill, its own patience, and each, in its own way, taught him another lesson about resilience and the art of letting go. Still, at every dusk, he couldn't break the old habit. His eyes drifted toward the tree line, searching for a flicker of tawny fur among the shadows, a fragile sign that she was still out there, somewhere close. Then one icy morning, Ethan woke to find the porch empty, silent to the point of suffocation. Days slipped into weeks, and still she did not return. Snow blanketed the pastures, swallowing every sound. The only tracks pressed into the white crust were those of deer and rabbits, none that belonged to her. He walked the path they had once taken together, called softly into the deep woods, but only the wind through bare branches answered with silence. A knot rose in his chest, part worry, part acceptance. He had always known this was how it would end. Wild hearts cannot be caged and should never be. Yet the absence left a hollow that nothing else could fill. Ethan kept tending the fence, now repaired and reinforced, and he still placed a small bowl of water near the tree line, though on most winter nights the surface froze solid as stone. As winter melted into the first days of spring, Ethan could almost feel her shadow running alongside him each time he checked his traps or mended the wooden gate. Every flicker of movement at the corner of his eye made his heart seize, but each time it was only a rabbit or the slim shape of a fox slipping through the grass. By the time summer came, he had stopped hoping she would return. Seasons folded over one another, years piling up like quilts stacked in an old wooden chest. Silver spread through the hair at Ethan's temples. At the rescue center, new volunteers appeared, many who had never heard the story of the man and the bobcat. He told it only when asked, and even then, his voice would lower, as though touching a fragile memory. Over time, the story became something of a legend, a hazy anecdote about how compassion could bridge worlds that seemed forever apart. And for Ethan, it remained tucked away in the deepest corner of memory, a place where sweetness and wilderness would live forever side by side. The story could have ended there. A single act of kindness, repaid with a few fragile months of companionship. But nature, as Ethan was coming to understand, always has a way of closing circles we never even knew were left open. One late autumn evening, as the sun bled crimson behind the hills and the first chill of winter crept into the air, Ethan sat quietly on his wooden porch, both hands wrapped around a cup of coffee still holding its warmth. The maple trees lining his driveway blazed in brilliant red, their leaves rustling softly, whispering the secrets of the season as the wind stirred through. Beneath it all was the steady chorus of crickets, occasionally broken by the distant howl of a coyote, the sound carrying across the fields and steeping the air in wilderness. He had just finished repairing the rickety barn door and was savoring the rare peace of the evening, his old wooden chair creaking in steady rhythm beneath his weight. The memory of the bobcat still lived in the way his gaze lingered on the shadows out there, even though he had long since stopped hoping to ever see her again. A faint rustle by the fence made him turn sharply. At first, there was nothing but the thick darkness pooled among the trees. Then, from deep within the gloom, a pair of golden eyes flared, catching the last shards of sunset. A shape emerged, sleek, powerful, and so familiar it made his chest tighten. The bobcat stepped into the clearing, her coat thicker and glossier than any memory he still carried. She moved with the calm confidence, the supple strength of an adult fully at home in her wild body. Ethan's breath caught hard in his throat. Years had passed, and yet she approached, as if she had left only yesterday. Her whiskers twitched as she sniffed, drawing in the scent of old wood, laced with dampness and the faint warmth of coffee. Around her neck, her fur still carried a faint scar, the mark of the wire that had once cut so cruelly, now nothing more than a silent reminder of the past. Ethan slowly set his cup down on the wooden table and rose to his feet. The whole world seemed to narrow, leaving only the still space between them. "Well, look at you," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "You made it." She gazed at him, calm, with none of the fear she had shown that first day. And in her eyes shimmered something else hard to name. Perhaps recognition, perhaps only a memory stirred by the familiar figure on the porch. Without breaking her gaze, She lowered her head and placed something gently on the step. In the fading light of dusk, Ethan saw it was a freshly killed rabbit, its ears still warm. A gift, an offering. An echo of gratitude reaching back to the moment years before, when her eyes had met his through the cruel snare of wire. Then, from behind her, two small shapes wobbled into view. Bobcat kittens, barely weaned, their paws too big for their thin little bodies, ears tipped with the familiar black tufts. Their coats were more heavily spotted than their mother's, while their golden eyes burned like molten metal under flame. They tumbled clumsily over the rabbit and each other, squeaking in high, clear voices, knowing nothing of fear, filled only with the innocent curiosity of youth. Ethan's heart swelled until it ached. Tears blurred his vision as he slowly knelt down, careful not to startle them. He extended one hand, palm down against the ground, letting the kittens catch his scent. They crept forward hesitantly, pawed at his fingers with velvet-soft claws, then quickly scampered back to their mother, pulled by a mix of curiosity and caution. The adult bobcat stepped forward and, to his surprise, brushed the side of her head gently against his chin, a gesture cats reserve only for companions they trust completely. The touch was fleeting, but it said everything. An invisible bridge stretched across the years, linking two worlds that were never meant to meet, anchored in a fragile moment of shared understanding. Ethan pressed his forehead to hers and closed his eyes. The scent of pine, warm fur, and damp earth flooded his senses, while the outside world blurred away, leaving only this pure connection. "Thank you," Ethan whispered hoarsely, uncertain if he was thanking her for the rabbit, for the trust, or simply for coming back. Perhaps all of it. They stayed together for only a few short minutes. Wild creatures never linger long where humans dwell not if they want to survive. The bobcat kittens bounded across the porch, pouncing on fallen red leaves, batting at his shoelaces, their high-pitched squeals ringing out so brightly that Ethan laughed aloud. Their mother never looked away, ears swiveling constantly, every muscle strung taut like a bow, ready to spring at the first hint of danger. Then, when she decided the visit had been long enough, the adult bobcat let out a low growl, deep and resonant, like an ancient command. At once, the kittens stopped their play, scrambling back to press against her strong legs. She clamped the rabbit back in her jaws and turned to leave. At the edge of the clearing, she paused, looked back at him, her eyes blazing like twin embers in the dark. It was the same look she had given him years ago when he freed her from the fence. But this time, it carried something more, perhaps recognition, perhaps gratitude for the second chance he had helped to provide. Ethan watched until the final flick of her tail disappeared into the night. He remained kneeling long after the darkness had swallowed the family whole, tears drying on his cheeks, his heart pounding with a strange blend of joy and an unnameable longing. He whispered a blessing into the empty air, hoping the wind would carry it deep into the forest. Then he rose, picked up the cup of coffee now gone cold, and settled back into his chair. The porch boards groaned under his weight as he leaned back and let out a long, trembling breath. The story had come full circle, yet the feeling it left within him stretched forward, vast, bright, and full of meaning. At the rescue center, months later, Ethan recounted the visit to the new volunteers, young faces lit with wonder as he described the bobcat's return, her kittens tumbling and playing at his feet. He emphasized the fragile, ethical line he had walked, how he avoided letting a predator grow accustomed to people, yet still reached out when she needed help, how he respected her wildness, never once trying to domesticate her. Ethan shared his belief that compassion does not mean control, that sometimes the best way to love a wild creature is to let it go free. The story rose beyond a simple tale of a man and a bobcat. It became a lesson in humility, stewardship, and trust. Years later, each time Ethan stepped onto the porch at dusk, he still thought he could hear the faint echo of soft paws on dry leaves, or feel the fleeting brush of whiskers against his chin. He kept on mending fences, hanging laundry, volunteering at the rescue center, and he kept telling the story to anyone willing to listen. His eyes still drifted toward the tree line, knowing that even if the bobcat and her kittens might never return, there would always be other wild creatures out there in need of kindness. Each animal carried a story of its own, and each story was a reminder that our backyard fences always intersect with the living, breathing world just beyond.